We all have estrogen in us to some degree, naturally, men and women. And sometimes the amount of estrogen you have is not the most relevant factor for whether you have symptoms of estrogen dominance or estrogen excess. But the way you get rid of your estrogen can be problematic. So I want to talk for a second about estrogen detoxification. Estrogen detoxification is a very important process. You make estrogen, different subject. You use estrogen, it plugs into receptors and it has actions in different places in your body. But then you have to get rid of it. And we don't just get rid of estrogen in its whole form. We break estrogen into pieces, we attach other things to it, and then we excrete it. And sometimes the pieces we break it into are more problematic than estrogen was in the first place. So we get rid of estrogen. First of all, we have three different kinds of estrogen. You have estriol, estradiol, and estrone. So estradiol is the one everybody normally is aware of. It's the strongest estrogen. It governs a lot of what's going on when you're a cycling female. Estriol is more prevalent during pregnancy. Estrone becomes kind of the dominant estrogen once you're in menopause. Anyway, so those three get detoxified in various cells throughout the body, but a lot of this happens in the liver. And they get kind of turned into or morphed into things called a 2-hydroxyestrogen, a 4-hydroxyestrogen, and a 16. Now, I'm not going to get into tons of detail because this would get too long, but 2-hydroxyestrogen is generally protective. 4 can be decidedly carcinogenic, so it can lead to problems that can cause cancer, breast cancer, uterine, ovarian, prostate. And then 16-hydroxyestrogen, which is kind of a proliferator. It makes the uterine lining grow, it makes breasts grow, it can make bones more dense. I mean, there are pros and cons to some of these, right? Some of these we need a little bit of. The 2, we need a lot of. The 16, we need a little bit. The 4, we'd rather not have much of it all. But that's what we break it down into in the liver, kind of the first phase of estrogen detoxification. But then it's got to go through a second phase of detoxification where it gets methylated. Now, a lot of you are aware of methylation. You've heard of the MTHFR genetic mutation. Many of you know that you have some version of that mutation. This is a little bit different. It uses some of the same substrates, like choline and trimethylglycine and things like that as methyl donors, but it uses a different methylator. It's not MTHFR, it uses something called COMT, catechol O-methyltransferase. Another place where you can have methylation SNPs or glitches in the system genetically, but again, different discussion. So you methylate these, and so you go from a 2-hydroxyestrogen and 4-hydroxyestrogen to a 2-methoxyestrogen or 4-methoxyestrogen, same thing with 16, and that just makes them much less problematic on the way out. And then third phase of detoxification, you have to excrete these. They have to generally go through the intestines, some of them into the urine, and you excrete them that way. Usually goes okay. There are things in your bile, which comes from the gallbladder, that are good at binding estrogen and hanging onto it to get rid of it. But there are other compounds that can be produced by some of the bacteria in your gut, one of which is called beta-glucuronidase, that can kind of detach that binding and allow the estrogen to be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream, and now you've got to process it all over again. In fact, that time it's even a little more weird because it comes in as one of those hydroxy or methoxyestrogens, and so it can cause a little more trouble on its second and third and fourth round through. So detoxification of estrogen takes 3 steps. It's really necessary. If you make a normal amount of estrogen but don't detoxify it or keep reabsorbing it, you're going to end up with too much estrogen, just like if you made too much. So we have to manage that process. In order to manage it, you have to be able to see it. There are certain ways to test for it. Testing blood won't show it to you because you have to see how you're throwing it away. You've got to kind of look in the trash can. So you have to do a urine test for that. In our office, we use one called a Dutch test, dehydrated urine test for complete hormones. It doesn't get sent to Holland. But that's an appropriate way to look at estrogen metabolism. There are a couple of other labs that do the test, but they don't include quite the breadth of information that we get from a Dutch test. So if you can see estrogen metabolism on a Dutch test, then there are things you can do to manage that, or at least know whether or not it's part of your problem. But it's implicated in things like heavy periods, infertility issues, weight gain, breast tenderness around your period. It can be involved in breast cancer, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer. If you've ever had any of those, this really must be managed if you want to control your risk. But I had a patient yesterday where we spent quite a bit of time discussing estrogen metabolism because it was a significant issue, and they were completely unaware of how any of that worked. So I wanted to just make a quick video and explain it to you guys. So if you have questions, put them in below. If this leads you to other questions or something, let me know, and I'll throw up another video and handle those questions. But I wanted to discuss estrogen metabolism and have a resource for you guys to understand it. All right? Hope you have a good one. Talk to you soon.